Thank you, Eric, and very glad to be here. I was in Charlotte roughly 2 years ago, and 2 years ago, market conditions versus today are much different. Things are beginning to light up now. I'm happy to see that not only the housing statistics better, but overall the realtor business activity improving, your business also improving, so very good news. I am from Washington, D.C., and it's good to be out of Washington. A lot of stuff going on in Washington, as you know. The shutdown is over temporarily before potential another shutdown and the debt default discussion to occur this mid-January, February timeframe. I am from a family with a diverse opinions, so I have family members who say, who are this nutcases, who wants to shut the government down, and then I have another family member who said, let's have a shutdown forever. Now, the real estate market, at least because of the shutdown, what's happening is that it did probably impacted some delays. I would say it's just a delay, not really a cancellation. Most of the mortgages today are backed by Fannie and Freddie, and Fannie and Freddie were operating, and therefore mortgages were going through. You did require IRS income verification, which that was shut down when the government was shut down. But that was more of a formality and not a determining factor for originating mortgages, because by that time, one would have already the pay stub, the tax return, and they just need to have the IRS verification just for formality, maybe protecting against a lawsuit. But during the shutdown, many of the lenders said, we will forgo that, and we will go ahead and just originate the mortgages. The FHA has an incentive to keep originating mortgages because for the first time in their history, they reported about $2 billion losses. Now, FHA program throughout their 7-year history has been a very important mortgage product for moderate income families across the country who don't have large down payment, and that is very important. But FHA wants us to remember stepped in when everyone stepped out. Just think about 2008 time period when the whole financial market system globally was on a potential collapse. And everyone stepped away from mortgage lending. And who was going to catch this falling knife? Well, FHA stepped in, knowing that they were going to get hit, they were going to lead from the process. Because no one else was lending, so FHA stepped in, started lending. Some of the mortgages did not turn out well, but they were the one who stepped in, and I think because they stepped in, with many of their other mortgages performing well. The bottom line is that they lost $2 billion in the process. This is probably the only year they will lose money. But just think about it in context. The purely private sector market of subprime mortgages, Wall Street, mortgage-backed security and such, to the tune of about 300 or 400 billion losses, 300 or 400 billion. Then you had a Fannie and Freddie, which at that time was a strange animal because they were a for-profit company with government backing. So the managers there were highly arrogant. They thought they could rule the world. The chairman of the, I think Freddie or Fannie, was nicknamed in Washington Circle as the chairman of the universe because of not only his high salary, but because of the Fannie profit at that time when the things were good. You know, he would donate money for various charity program for the image part. So they knew that he was the sugar daddy of the whole Washington part, but also giving a lot of money to politicians in the process. And as a government entity to lobby, that doesn't make sense. I mean, the government backing as a private citizen like you to lobby, I mean, that's perfectly legitimate. You want to express your views to members of Congress. So Fannie and Freddie, anyway, lost about $150 billion. So you have private sector losing $300 billion, Fannie and Freddie $150 billion, FHA only $2 billion in that context, and they were the one coming in, stepping in, trying to catch the falling knife to stabilize the market. So I would say overall, the FHA has done a not a great job, but I think a very respectable job in that context. But I mention this because in Washington, aside from the shutdown, the things that can really impact your business is things like legislation that is going through, which is to say, let's get rid of FHA. Why have FHA? It's giving up taxpayers' money, even though I gave you the context on that. And then there's also a discussion about let's get rid of Fannie and Freddie. Well, Fannie and Freddie is completely different today versus what it was back then. Back then, again, it was a strange animal, for-profit company with high, very excessively high manager salaries and all that part, with government backing. Today, it is essentially a government agency. Many things in America, you have to be amazed at the entrepreneurship, the innovation that occurs in America. I'm sure everyone has one of these, either iPhone or smartphone or something. You never, ever would want to rely on government to do such thing. They will mess it up. But on a simple, very simple product that doesn't require innovation, things like 30-year fixed-rate mortgages that your grandparents used to build up equity. Well, today, 30-year fixed-rate mortgages are also very important for you and for your children. It doesn't require innovation. Just meet those income ratios. You need it, we will provide the mortgages, and we can sell it to Fannie and Freddie. No innovation, plain vanilla mortgage product without the government guarantee. Then what you will have is higher mortgage rates. 30-year fixed-rate mortgages will probably disappear. And so we have to look at, if we were to get rid of Fannie and Freddie, what is the alternative? But that has been discussed, and I think the alternative is really bad, because what will happen is that you will have only the large banks doing mortgage-backed securities, and they will use their leverage to push out the smaller lenders out of the market. So you have concentration of large banks getting larger, and the legislation actually has, the acronym is called PATH, P-A-T-H, Protecting American Taxpayers and Homeowners. Protecting American Taxpayers and Homeowners. Who will be opposed to that? So at least the name-wise, it looks very nice, but that would essentially get rid of Fannie and Freddie. And what would happen is that a large bank will take control. And if you ever visited Wells Fargo, here in Charlotte, Bank of America, and other places, you see clearly on their window, FDIC. So if the large bank ever goes down, taxpayers will be on the hook. So don't think that somehow that just because the name is protecting taxpayers, somehow you will protect taxpayers. If the large bank takes risk, they go down, the taxpayers will be on their hook. And it doesn't protect homeowners because many homeowners will be denying mortgages because mortgage rates will be higher. So we have to look at the balance condition regarding what kind of legislation gets passed in Washington. So we are very, very vigilant in looking at to assure that homeowners are not whacked, that real estate business continues to thrive, that trying to educate that real estate is highly important for the broader economy situation. So let me go through the charts, and by the way, this charts will be available to you in some way. I'm not sure whether it will be posted on the website at the Charlotte Regional Association of Realtor website, or whether they will send it to you by email, so you don't have to copy everything. So PowerPoint will be available to you. So I'll have both the national picture as well as the local picture. And hopefully we can use some of these slides with your clients who may be still hesitant. Actually, a couple of people actually came to me this morning to say I have a couple of buyers, but they don't want to commit. And we don't want to rush buyers, but they still, any information to help them make that decision, I think that would be helpful. So what do we have? This is pending contracts, signing of the contract. And we start out from the bubble years, things were really wrapping up, and this is when people were getting mortgages without any income documentation. And then we see the crash occur. And then you see a couple of spikes that occur. And what is those couple of spikes? Those couple of spikes were the $8,000 homebuyer tax credit. NAR was the leader in advocating that the market was bleeding really bad. 8 million job losses at that time. And housing was going to continue to bleed even more. And let's see if there's something to just stabilize the market until the economy come back. So even as the economy was losing 8 million jobs, $8,000 homebuyer tax credit induced those people with stable jobs to respond to the incentives. So you saw some activity. The deadline approach, we thought that it needed to be extended a little further. So a second deadline occurred, so we got the second peak. And once that disappeared, NAR also at that time, we began to see the economy recover, jobs being created, and said, okay, let the economy do its own work, and we should not rely on tax credit forever. So NAR stopped advocating for the tax credit, and then initially declined, but as the economy improved, jobs started to be created, one see a natural pickup. And now the current activity essentially matches the activity of the tax credit time period. I circled that final 3 months because we have seen the pending home sales contract signing beginning to weaken a bit from a very high levels, and that is attributed to the falling affordability conditions. You have home prices now rising, income is not, and also mortgage rates rising. So that is beginning to hamper some of the potential buyers from reaching the marketplace. The closing, so you have pending contracts, but pending does not automatically mean closing, as you all know. There's a lot of friction in the market. But so pending is more earlier indicator, closing is a lagging indicator. The one thing that we did notice is that when the mortgage rate began to rise from 3.5% to 4.5%, people wanted to close the deal quickly. And, they said, let's get it done, because they were afraid that mortgage rates may rise further. And we always see this every time when mortgage rates rise. The initial phase of rising mortgage rate leads to rush of closings. But the pendings actually decline. So if there's a fewer pending in the pipeline, then the closing will inevitably fall. So at least so far, the lagging indicator of the closing is showing a very solid figures. Buyers have come back to the market, and as a result, the inventories are falling and falling and falling. Nationwide, it is at a 13-year low level on the inventory count, how many homes are available for sale. In Charlotte, it's not an acute inventory shortage. You are beginning to see a lower inventory, but not a terribly low inventory situation. I have heard stories, and fairly consistent stories out of California, where you will have one home come on the market over the weekend, and by Monday, there is 50 offers. And you say, market is hot. Maybe that's a good thing, just to recover, and it's not good for practitioners. Imagine, if you are the listing agent, you have to review 50 contracts. And also, if you are the buyer agent, one buyer agent is happy, 49 is going home unhappy. So too heated market is not good, because, and also from the general consumers have to make their decision in a rush fashion. They should make a comfortable decision. But the low inventory is leading to this situation where you have now multiple bids beginning to return to the market. People are making rush decisions. So we don't want to have this, but unfortunately, buyers have eaten up the inventory, and the inventory levels are coming for 13 years levels. Newly constructed home inventory, freshly built, is essentially at a 50-year-old inventory levels. But it is much smaller animal, smaller size of the market compared to existing. Existing home sales market will be about 90%. Newly constructed home market will be 10%. So even though it's a 50-year-old level, it's still a much smaller segment of the market. Some people say, well, what about those shadow inventories? So you have visible inventories, low, low, low. But what about the shadows? Those homes that are not on the market, but will surely come onto the market because homeowners are under distress. They have not been paying their mortgages for more than 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And also some of the properties are already in the foreclosure process, but not yet REO, because banks, after being sued, they want to ensure all the papers are signed correctly, so it takes some time on the foreclosure process. So this is what it looks like regarding the shadows. Overall, it's falling, but not in every state. So North Carolina is the blue, so it's doing better than the US average regarding the seriously delinquent shadow inventory. So one sees the steady declining shadows, which means that the number of distressed property sales going into next year will be fewer than what you experienced this year. And this year was fewer than what it was last year, so you will continue to see falling shadow. So in other words, visible inventory is low, shadow inventory will be falling, so that's not going to help much on the overall inventory front. Just to show you some different state differences, yellow line is the state of New York, and it's not falling because New York is a little different foreclosure process. It requires, in North Carolina, you don't pay your mortgages for an extended period. Banks say, look, you sign a contract to say that if you don't pay a mortgage, banks can take over the property. That was the contract, and we're going to follow up with the contract. In the state of New York, it has to get an approval from a judge. And judges tend to be very sympathetic to distressed homeowners, so they say, time out, let's give homeowners additional time to repair their finances and so forth. So it's pluses and minuses. Plus side is maybe some homeowners do benefit from extra time. But the minus is that it's delaying the recovery of the market condition in the state of New York. So the home price growth in New York is virtually none. While in North Carolina, you are beginning to see price increases. So it delays the recovery. And furthermore, as with any good intended program, there always seems to be some bad guys who want to game the system. So we have heard that in places like the state of New York and New Jersey, very similar case, where homeowners will not pay their mortgages. They know they will not be kicked out for 2 or 3 years. So they don't pay their mortgages, middle of the night, sneak out, next day, put their home for rent, collect the rental income, and just game the system, and knowing that they will not be pushed out. So there's always pluses and minuses. But North Carolina, you are assured that inventory levels are falling, the shadow inventory is falling, market is recovering faster, there's no additional delay in the recovery. When the inventory levels are low, with any business, Apple Fruit, Apple Computer, it depletes, inventory level goes down, we want to restock those inventories. So the inventory on homes are falling, so one would think that home builders would want to restock that inventory. So how are the home builders responding? Well, they are not. Home builders, this is housing starts, and this is nationwide. The horizontal line is a long-term average. And also it is logically consistent with the population growth that we have in America. America is one of the few advanced economies to have a respectable population growth. About 3 million additional people in the country each year. So I think we have 311 million people now, next year 314 million, and then 317 million, and so forth. Japan population is declining. Germany population probably topped out. Italy population is falling. Another thing that you will hear from Washington on the discussion unrelated to real estate is about entitlement reform. If one wants to see what American can anticipate about, are we doing way too much on the entitlements in relation to the younger people who can support that payment for the future, one has to, I think, look towards Japan, because the baby boom phenomenon, the war ended at the same time for the U.S. as in Japan. But the U.S. has a population growth. Japan is population declining, so their crunch on the entitlement situation will be even worse in Japan. So one has to just look at what's going to happen in Japan as to how it may happen in the U.S. But the population declining countries, they don't need to build additional homes. But in America, because we have population growth, we need to produce roughly 1.5 million additional housing starts each year. It's never horizontal line. There's some fluctuation. So during the bubble years, we produce too much. Then during the downturn, we underproduce. But we have been underproducing for a prolonged period. We do see some pickup, but those pickups are not anywhere near close to that horizontal line, which means that we have today inventory shortage, and it appears to be getting worsening regarding the inventory situation, lower and lower and lower. Housing starts should relieve that. Housing starts is now nowhere close to that horizontal line. Therefore, the shortage of inventory in Charlotte market, Rest of the country, broadly speaking, will be, the inventory shortage will be with us in 2014, which means that it's going to be more challenge trying to get that listing. But if you do get that listing, you'll be an easier sale, and also the prices are likely to be bumped up in the process. This is the North Carolina permit situation, very similar. So you see that during the boom years, there's a lot of activity, the downturn, and then one sees slight pickup in 2012, 2013, estimated by December, but it's still well below, say, what happened in the year 2000. And I think year 2000 is always a good reference point because 2000 was a very boring housing year, non-eventful, no bubble, no crash, very normal, but still well below that level. And you begin to wonder, okay, we have inventory shortage. Builders build, and it looks like they're probably pretty much selling it, whatever they're building it. So what is wrong with the builders in terms of not able to respond to this market incentives? And strange situation today regarding housing building. A little different, as you said, different, not strange, different now versus under normal times. Normal times, you have all these small-time builders who build 10 homes a year in a local community. But you add up all the small builders, and they produce more homes than large builders all combined. So it's the smaller builders who produce more in the aggregate versus the large builders like KB Homes, Lennar, Toll Brothers. What's happening today is that small-time builders have always relied on construction loans from the local banks. And the local banks are saying, sorry, we don't do any more construction loans anymore because if we do, it is classified as being a risky asset, and someone from Washington will fly in and want to examine our books. And they don't want all that hassle. So they say, well, we're going to play safe, we have process, we're going to buy government bonds, we're not going to do construction loans. So small-time builders are being hindered because of difficulty of obtaining construction loans. But the large builders, they don't need construction loans. They go to Wall Street, issue stocks and bonds, raise money, use that money to buy lots and start building. So this recovery, small recovery that you see in the housing starts, and it's still underproduction, relatively speaking, but that small recovery, that's all coming from large builders. So you have a situation where the large builders are getting larger or taking advantage of the fact that small-time builders are out of the market, while the small-time builders are not participating. And you say, why is this the case? It could be, or at least the community banks, they are saying that this onerous regulation, particularly related to Dodd-Frank bill, that made it very uncertain regarding what is right, what is wrong, what is legal, what is on the borderline. So because of that less clarity regarding regulation, and furthermore, half of the Dodd-Frank has yet to be implemented. So half is still uncertain. So in the uncertainty, the lenders are very hesitant, at least regarding the construction loans. Construction loan, they cannot sell it to Fannie and Freddie, anything like that. So because of that, you have the situation. I mentioned earlier about getting rid of Fannie and Freddie. That's purely Republican-driven legislation today. Dodd-Frank bill, that was purely Democratic legislation that occurred. So it's on the both parties that is hindering on all this part of the housing lending, whether construction loans or the mortgage accessibility. Charlotte market, I guess it's doing little better, relatively better. So you see some pickup, still well short, but a little more meaningful pickup compared to, say, state of North Carolina or the overall U.S. conditions. But given that it is still below the 2000 level, that means that housing inventory shortage that you are beginning to encounter will be with you going into 2014. Mortgage rate in the meantime has risen, which is the reason why you see that pending contract beginning to come down. But I think this is more of a psychological adjustment for consumers. Consumers have been used to 3.5% mortgage rate, 3.5%. Now suddenly it is 4.5% and say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, you have to explain to them 3.5% was unimaginable bonus rates. 4.5 is still good. Look at this history. Anyone who has been in the industry for 30 years, they remember the 18% mortgage rates. And when it came to 10%, they thought, wow, unimaginable, 10%. But even at 6%, most economists were saying 6% is the absolute bottom. Well, it went down even further. But now it's coming off that absolute low levels, and it's not going to return to 3.5%. I just don't see how it could return. In fact, the Federal Reserve will be steadily ending their ultra-loose monetary policy going forward, which means the mortgage rate overall direction will be higher and higher. So this time next year is probably going to be maybe 5% or 5.5%. So 4.5% today is much better than 5.5% next year. So overall direction will be a rising mortgage rate conditions. Rates were low, but something that I'm still scratching my head over is cash transactions are so high. Why are people not taking advantage of this exceptionally low mortgage rates? Cash transaction, roughly 1/3 of all transactions across the country. I don't know what the figure is here, but generally speaking, cash tends to be more higher in, say, Miami, Vegas, where more than half. So the rest of the country may be like 1/4 situation. But compared to the normal situation, it's still very high. We are in a economic recovery, but still not a very robust expansion. And some people will say we are still in an economic recession, mentally. Statistically, we are out of the recession, but mentally, we are still in a recession. What the heck people are giving cash in this situation? But when I ask realtors about it, we take survey of realtors, they're saying their clients, they are coming in all cash. And some are very creative financing, which is to say that because of the tight underwriting standards, if they can find a cash method, then they come up with cash. So whether they have wealthier parents who may apply cash, or you have a group of family members coming up with cash and lending temporarily. And I also hear that after several months, these cash buyers then take out a home equity loan and then pay back whoever they borrowed the cash from. So in a sense, they are getting a mortgage, but at a little later time than what they first entered. But also the investors are essentially coming in all cash, because trying to get investor loans is very, very difficult. Pending contract is coming down. We also want to track something before pending contracts. Pending contracts I consider as a hard-coded data in the multiple listing service. So multiple listing surveys show days on the market, how many homes there are for sale. But is there some information before the multiple listing surveys? So we take a survey of about 3,000 realtor members across the country and ask them a question that is given before multiple listing surveys, qualitative question. Things like, if you hold an open house, what is the foot traffic like now versus last month or 1 year ago? How is your phone inquiries, or when you make some calls, your home sellers' enthusiasm about potentially listing their homes? Whether they say outright no, I'm not in the market, or whether they say I'm considering, so those questions. So all this qualitative information, we twist the numbers to come up with some kind of figure, and this is what we show, which is that about 2 years ago, 24 months ago, someone just turned the switch on regarding the buyer activity. Buyers are coming to the market from 2 years ago, just the buyer enthusiasm really started to come. The servers really did not respond. But again, the circle item is more recent months, which is to say that the buyer enthusiasm is beginning to taper off. Which is just consistent with, which means that pending contract will probably further decline since this is implying some downturn. But note that even the decline in buyer enthusiasm, there's still overall more buyers chasing after sellers. So you still have this housing shortage situation. Because of housing shortage, prices are now rapidly rising in many parts of the country. Phoenix, prices up 30% from 1 year ago. So someone who bought a $100,000 home in Phoenix, now it's $130,000, just in 1 year time span. Of course, the home used to be $300,000. So someone who bought at a peak, they're not seeing any enjoyment yet. But someone who bought it at 100, they're smiling. And many people in the Phoenix market are smiling because they were able to buy it at some really low points. I show two graphs, which is NAR median price and Case-Shiller price index. Case-Shiller, at least you should be familiar with it because your clients may be asking about it. So median price is very simple. All the homes sold, what is the middle price? And you compare how that is changing over time. And Case-Shiller index is a very elegant formula. In fact, Dr. Shiller was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics just last week. Congratulations to him. His emphasis actually was more about that buying stocks and bonds or homes. It is determined not by fundamentals of price to income ratio, price to rent ratio. Let me just go. Dr. Shiller believed that price of stocks, price of homes are not determined by fundamentals, but it is determined by psychology. Somehow there is a bandwagon effect. If people start buying and your neighbor bought and start getting rich, you say, no way, I'm going to participate. I'm not going to have my neighbor get rich and I don't participate in that. Or during the downturn, people are overly pessimistic, so things can overcorrect downwards. So his belief is that it's the psychology that drives many aspects of the prices. But anyway, he has a very elegant formula of determining prices. Interesting thing to note is that whatever NAR median prices move, Case-Shiller eventually respond, pretty much says the same thing. So Case-Shiller is a bit of lagging indicator, but both are moving in the same direction. So the prices are rising broadly because of the housing shortage. And because I anticipate housing shortage to persist next year, we will continue to see price increases occurring. This is Case-Shiller price index for the Charlotte market. So you see nice run up, topped out, drop, and then now bouncing off from that low levels. So someone who bought at the peak, they're still underwater, but people who are buying more recently, they're participating in this gain rate. So this is an index, so you would interpret it as a percentage change. So the interpretation is that from 2000 through the height, prices increased roughly 35%, and from that point, it dropped from whatever that percentage-wise do. And then now it looks like the prices have risen about 10% from the low point. Just on average. Of course, it depends on neighborhood to neighborhood. And just to, this is the same chart, by the way. This is Charlotte data that I superimposed with Phoenix data just to show you comparison. It's the same data. Look at what it looks like, how the Phoenix market. Another logical process that may say prices are still on the upward path, or there's more room for prices to grow. There's the psychology part, but you also have to look at the fundamentals. So the fundamental is we have housing shortage. Buyers are still, there are more buyers than sellers overall. Another way to view it is new home price versus existing home price. New home price always carries a premium over existing because it's new and better stuff, better appliances, but the premium tends to be about 10 to 15%. But the premium gap began to open up. So if there is a gap, two things can happen. Either over time, the gap will narrow because existing home prices begin to catch up, or the new home prices begin to come down. New home prices will not come down because for the builders, they have to pay for the copper, they have to pay for the lumber, they have to pay for the construction worker, and they have to add on some profit margin. Without that, they will not build a home. Only with that conditions they will build. Unfortunately, small-time builders cannot build. It's only the big-time builders who are doing it. But the builders would only do that. So the new home prices have a certain floor. You cannot go below all that profit margin, construction costs. But the existing home prices, right now, in relation to the new home prices, there is a gap, which means there's more room to go up. So aside from the housing shortage, this is implying that there's still room for existing homes to catch up to the marketplace. A survey by the Wall Street Journal, survey of economists, there's roughly 50 economists on the panel. I also participated in it. And they just asked a question. What do you think will happen to home prices this year, next year? Every economist have their own formula. Some people place more importance on interest rates, other people place more importance on job creation, housing shortage, or whatever. Everyone has their own coefficients and their formula. But the 50 economists, on average, are saying that the prices will continue to rise next year. Just this is consensus forecast. One good thing about consensus forecast is that most economists are wrong. But consensus somehow is correct, or just to be more correct than any one individual economist. If I was to ask you, just a little aside, what is my weight? Is that 150 pounds, 200 pounds, and you make a guess, and you write it down. And I take everyone's guesses, and then figure out what the average is. And believe it or not, your guess is wrong, but the average of everyone together is very close to actual population. That's actually how it works. You can do that experiment at your own leisure time with your staff office. Rental population has been rising, reflecting the very tight underwriting situation. So many of the renters are not able to buy a home. Some renters should never buy a home. They are just not financially ready, mentally ready. But there are other good renters who could become successful homeowners. They're also still being rented. Homeowner population in the meantime has flattened out in America. So you have some first-time home buyers, but they are being negated by people who are being foreclosed upon, so there's no real net increase in home ownership. And as a result of this, Time magazine, I believe at the early part of the year, ran a story, a front cover page, Renter Nation. And I think that's more overly dramatic. And of course, in any magazine, any press, they need to be dramatic to get at least people's attention. But we are still comfortably solid majority home ownership country. Home ownership rate today is 64%. It used to be almost 70%, so it is coming down, but home ownership rate is still solid in a solid majority, about 2/3 of the country. But still the trend is rising renters, but flatten out in the number of homeowners. And this is a pity, because the data on the wealth distribution shows the following. This data is from the Federal Reserve, and it shows that how much wealth does the renter have on average. And it shows about $4,000 on average. Some renters have more, other renters are living paycheck to paycheck with nothing. But note that from one year to the next, renter wealth do not rise. They are always pretty much at that level. For homeowners, it is determined by how home prices move. During the bubble years, home prices increased large wealth, and then with a crash. But now, because of the price recovery, one is beginning to see some wealth recovery as well. Some homeowners are underwater, so they have zero. But the other homeowners, they have paid off their mortgages. So any price changes are all their equity gains. So this is on average. And Warren Buffett, simple investment strategy. We can teach to kindergarten students. Buy low. That's his investment strategy, just buy low. Well, home prices were low. And Warren Buffett actually said in CNBC to say that if he had money, he would buy 500,000 homes. Right? He has the money. But I think what he meant was that he cannot buy 500,000 homes, and how do you manage that? But he did very well buying stocks related to the housing market recovery, like the painting business, the lumber business, and all that part. So he has done very well anticipating housing market recovery. So if we want to see a successful renter become homeowners, successful homeowners, they should be buying low. But the data shows that renter population is rising and they're not buying low. Or they want to buy low, but they cannot access mortgages. So they're missing out on this. While investors are taking advantage of the lower prices, some people who are looking up to buy a home, they are in the market. So you have a situation where, independent of whatever Washington wants to do regarding wealth distribution or whatever it is, the determining factor for America's wealth distribution is really about how the housing market moves. And the housing market is moving such that home prices are now rising. That's an equity gain. Yet now we have renters rising and they are not participating in this wealth gain. So bottom line is that today we have more unequal wealth distribution now than before. And who do we blame? It's the Dodd-Frank bill that is limiting, making it very difficult to obtain mortgages. Things like QM, QRM, some of you are familiar with it. They wanted to impose possibly 20% minimum down payment to buy a home. We were opposed to that, and I think they will not impose that. But there's still new legislation coming out in January. We hope that they won't impose a minimum down payment because Veterans Affairs mortgages are doing very well, and many of you know that Veterans Affairs mortgages, zero down payment. But stay within your budget. If you stay within your budget, you will perform well. You overstretch your budget, you are asking for trouble. This is the case of PATH, which I mentioned earlier, removing Fannie and Freddie. Without any government guarantee, mortgage rates would be higher. Banks thinking that maybe this will be the case, they want to play cautious. This is the case of too many lawsuits, meaning that one day after the other, so many lawsuits against the banks. And you said, well, some are valid. The banks made a mistake, and they need to be punished and rightly compensate for that. Other people are calling a shakedown to say that, well, the banks have money. Let's go where the banks are and put some lawsuits to it. But the bottom line of the lawsuit is that the banks, they have to hold on to additional cash at the bank and not release that just in case they get sued. So the money is not going to the potential mortgage borrowers as a result. Or is it just a case of legacy, which means that bad things happen in the housing market, so naturally the lenders kind of pull back. They don't want to make the same mistake twice. So whatever the reasoning is, right now we have more unequal wealth distribution because some people are participating in housing recovery and others are not. Charlotte market, green light, all good. So home sale year to date is up about 26%. I mean, last year was decent year. You had a gain of, I think, about 10 or 15% last year. So this is on top of that. So 2 straight years of good expansion. Prices are so, at least the median price is rising, which means at least business volume, dollar volume activity is up about 35% on average. Meanwhile, the inventory is falling, and it's anticipated to fall further because housing stock is not keeping up with the long-term average. Household formation is beginning to pop out. This graph is a very good news for you. And in fact, it is this graph, it is for this reason, this graph reason, why I have been saying to many, saying for the past couple of years, that anticipate a multi-year housing market recovery. Multi-year. Over the next 5 years, probably 4 of those 5 years will be an improving year for you. I don't say 5 out of 5, all data there's a little fluctuation. Why do I say that? First, let's define what a household is. A single person living in an apartment, that's one household. Family of 7, that's one household. 7 people, one household. So household is housing units. This is how household formation has been over time. Roughly about 1 million on average with some fluctuation. Then you had a crash. And household formation got suppressed. And it's understandable during a recession, job losses, that household formation gets suppressed. But it's a multi-year suppression. Something that you have experienced or know people who have experienced, namely young adults coming in to live with their parents. But this is just unsustainable. At some point, they will move out. So when will they move out? Well, because of the suppression in household formation that occurred for 5 straight years, is bound to pop out in a nice way for the next 5 years, which means that there will be increase in demand for rental housing as well as home ownership housing over the next 5 years. So it's not a trade-off because you have more people just popping out and seeking out housing. And this will happen as long as we have job creation, economic expansion, and that's what we have. So I think because of this, that over the next 5 years, 4 of those 5 years will be an improving business year for you. Meantime, economy, no recession, economy continues to expand. And the job situation is that in the downturn, 8 million job losses. Now, about 7 million job creation from the low point. So we have not reached a prior peak, but we are closely reaching there. The only thing is that over this time period, which is 5 or 6 years, we have fresh high school graduates, fresh college graduates coming in. So we are only trying to cover for what we have lost. So it's still a long way to go in terms of full recovery. North Carolina job situation, there is a seasonal fluctuation, more jobs in the summer versus winter. But okay, that's my timer to say hurry up. This is showing that just like the rest of the country, there was a downturn, almost back to the peak, but not yet back to the peak level. Charlotte is doing better, Greater Charlotte. You are already back to the peak, but now it's a matter of expansion. Now you will love this chart. This is a long-term graph from 1939 all the way to 2013, which shows that North Carolina is one of the fastest growing states in the country, except in the past 10 years. 10 years you flatten out, before it was one of the fastest growing. Now that the jobs are recovering, I think we may go back to that red line situation. And once you go back to the red line trend, then you can anticipate even faster growth. And that's been the overall trend, that people from the northern states, New Jersey, New York, Michigan, they want to come down to the south, move to Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, so you see a more faster job growth in the southern states versus the northern states. Banks are flush with cash. But the frustrating part is that this cash is not coming to the Main Street. The question is it regulation, is it a lawsuit, is it just a natural caution? But this money is not coming out. And if we went back to normal underwriting standards, I would move very fast because of the time factor. If we move back to the normal underwriting standards, normal credit score in terms of loan approval, there will be about 15 to 20% additional buyers. 15 to 20% additional clients for you, but that's not happening because of the tight underwriting standards. The forecast nationwide is that this year was good. Charlotte clearly did better than the national average this year. Next year, I don't anticipate any increase in unit sales, but prices will still go up. So the business dollar volume will all come from price increases next year. Given that North Carolina and Charlotte is doing better than the national, we may actually beat the national average again going forward. And the long-term trends are such that. So you have had good 2012, even better 2013. So 2014, next year, you will be getting improvement, but not in terms of unit sales, but primarily from the prices. But the risk to the forecast is really coming from Washington, all these policy changes about Fannie and Freddie without any alternatives, and also possibly changing the mortgage interest deduction. Because of large budget deficit, they're looking for any revenue source. So they're saying maybe we want to turn away mortgage interest deduction. But we have heard loud and clear from our members. 80% of the members said, don't give in on mortgage interest deduction. Just bite tooth and nail. It's been around for 100 years, and this is what Americans expect from that. And student debt load is a hindrance to first-time buyers. And the first-time buyer percentage, again, is low, implying that we still have too many renters in relation to the homeowner situation. And finally, the realtor income. Because of the market improvement, realtor income on average is rising. So it's about now $42,000 on average. But realtor income is unlike any other profession. If you said elementary school teacher earns $42,000, most elementary school teachers earn $45,000, $40,000, $42,000. Most elementary school teachers. Firefighters are a certain amount. Most firefighters earn around that range. Not with realtors. This is average, but if you look at the numbers, we have 20% of our members, 200,000 members, with six-figure gross commission. And we have even more, almost one-third, 360,000 with less than 10,000. Which means that this real estate business is highly entrepreneurial business. Averages don't really mean too much because some people will succeed, other people will struggle. It is a highly entrepreneurial dynamic, and it could be sometimes it sways. Some people who have been successful one year have difficulty next year. But one consistent trend that we find is that people who have been in the business for a longer period do better. People Yeah, that's the one principal driver, which means that the longer you are in the business means you have built up a larger referral base. And when we ask the clients how you feel about your realtors, and they are very positive, and they will say, I will recommend my friends, colleagues over to my realtors. But they say my realtors, not the other realtor. So people love their realtor, but not the other realtors, which means that as long as you serve your client's interests over the long haul, you can steadily build that referral base over time. And the final chart is the overall membership figure on the realtor population. During the bubble years, we had way too many people coming into the industry thinking that this was an easy way to make money. They quickly found out that it was not. So they left the business. But now this is a good chart for you because it's implying that we have a real estate recovery, but no meaningful increase in membership. We have no control over membership. It's how people will decide to come into the industry or not. We have no determination, so we just let the market determine. But what the market is saying is that housing market is improving, but not with any meaningful increase in membership, which means that economic pie is expanding, but you don't have to share that pie with more people coming into the industry. So good news for you. So I hope this information, you can use it in some way. I see, again, there's a lot of risk factor coming out of Washington, but broadly speaking, assuming that no bad legislation gets passed, you should see a steady improvement for the next 5 years. So best of luck to you. Thank you.